coin, a financial game that we are releasing on Ergo today. This is joint work with Alexander Chapunoy and Pulsars. The goal of the game is to hodl your ergs for very long periods of time, and the game is designed in such a way that the longer you hodl, the more you earn. Moreover, surprisingly, we have been able to prove that the price of the game's asset always goes up. So this has actually been mathematically proven, and we're gonna see this proof later in this talk. The rules of the game are very simple. So simple that we can describe them in a white paper that has just one page, as you can see here. And there are only two actions in the game. One action is that you can hodl your ergs, and this means that you deposit ergs into a common reserve, and by doing that you mint hodl ergs. And the other action allows you to unhodl. This means that you can burn your hodl ergs, and by doing that you withdraw ergs from the common reserve. On both of these actions, the price of a hodl erg is the amount of ergs in the reserve divided by the current supply of hodl ergs. When you hodl, you don't pay any fee, but when you unhodl, you're penalized with a fee, let's say 3% or 10%, and this fee remains in the common reserve. In this way, players who are unhodling pay this fee, and players who keep hodling benefit from this fee. This incentivizes players to hodl longer and longer. So let's look at an example, and in this example we are assuming a fee of 10%. So in the left side you can see the game state. So we are starting with a reserve of 1 erg, a supply of 1 hodl erg, and therefore a price of 1. And then you can see 3 players, Anna, Bob, and Anal with pseudonym Cuckoo. And you can also see the initial balances of Anna, Bob, and Cuckoo, right? So Anna has 499 ergs, and Bob has 2000 ergs, and Cuckoo has 140 ergs. And they're all starting with a balance of 0 hodl ergs. Now let's suppose that Anna decides to hodl all her ergs, so 499 ergs. So this means that Anna will now have 499 hodl ergs and 0 ergs, and the balances of Bob and Cuckoo will remain unchanged, and the game state will change to a reserve of 500 ergs, a supply of 500 hodl ergs, and the price remains unchanged at 1. Because remember that the price is R divided by S. Now, suppose that Bob comes and decides to hodl all his ergs again as well. So now we have the same situation. Now Bob has 2000 hodl ergs and 0 ergs, and the balances of Anna and Cuckoo remain unchanged. And the game state changes to a reserve of 2500 ergs, a supply of 2500 hodl ergs, and the price still of 1. Now let's suppose that Bob has weak hands, and he heard about the latest meme coin trend and decides to unhodl his ergs to sell the ergs and buy some meme coin, So what will happen is that because we have a fee of 10%, Bob will receive only 1800 ergs back, and 200 ergs will remain in the reserve. So this means that now the reserve of the contract is 700 ergs, the supply of hodl ergs is 500, and therefore the price, which is 700 divided by 500, is 1.4 now. So the price of hodl ergs increased. Now suppose that Cuckoo hodls 100 ergs. So this is what happens, and the game state is updated like this as well. Now, imagine that Anna decides to unhodl 499 hodl ergs. So at a price of 1.4, Anna will receive 628.74 ergs, and she will now have a balance of 0 hodl ergs. And the game state will be updated as follows. So the reserve will be 840 minus 628.74, right? So it will be 211.26. The supply of hodl ergs will now be 101. And if you divide R by S, you get now a price of hodl erg of 2.091. So the price increased again. Now imagine that Kuko decides to unhodl its 100 hodl ergs. So Kuko will get this amount of ergs. So basically it's 100 hodl ergs multiplied by the price minus 10%, right? And this is 188.19 ergs that Kuko receives. And the game state will be updated to this. The reserve will be 23 ergs approximately, the supply will be back to 1, the price increased again to 23.07. So as you can see, Anna had a gain of 129.74 ergs. So she gained 26% compared to what she had in the beginning. Bob lost 200 ergs because he unhodled too early, and this was a loss of 10% for him. And Kuko earned 48.19 ergs, and this was a gain of 34% for him. So if you sum these values, also together with the increase in the reserve of the contract, right, 23.07, you will see that no money was created, right? No ergs were created or destroyed in this process. So it's a zero-sum game. What one player earns is what other players have lost, right? And the longer you hodl, the more you earn. Now, regarding that initial claim that the price of hodl erg never falls. So this is actually a theorem. You can see the proof here. We'll not go into details of this proof, but it's a simple proof by induction. So for any sequence of actions, the price at the end of the sequence of actions is greater or equal to the price at the beginning of the sequence of actions. And we prove this by induction, right? So in the base case, this is trivially true. In the induction case, we can show that when we have a hodl action, the price remains the same as we have seen in the previous example. And when we have an unhodl action, the price increases. So later you can check these equations that I'm showing here in the slide. Now, what is the fine print of this incredible claim, right? The point is that this price of hodl erg is in relation to the price of erg, right? So if the price of erg relative to USD falls, the price of hodl erg relative to USD may fall too, actually. And even if the price of erg and hodl erg rise, you may still lose money like Bob did if you do not hodl as long as other players. So the theorem is indeed mathematically true, that the claim is true, but remember that this is not financial advice, right? And this is just a fun financial game. So some of you might be wondering whether this is a Ponzi scheme. And one thing that this game and Ponzi schemes have in common is that they're both zero-sum games, right? What one player earns, the other loses. But the actual answer for this question is that no, hodl coin is actually the dual of a Ponzi scheme. So in a Ponzi scheme, investors who enter earlier are paid with money from investors who enter later. In Hodl coin, players who exit later are paid with money from players who exit earlier. In Ponzi schemes, rules are opaque and investors are fooled. Whereas in Hodl coin, rules are clear and players are informed about these rules in advance. And finally, Ponzi schemes invariably lead to unstable collapse. While in Hodl coin, we conjecture that there is a self-stabilizing effect going on because as players start to unhodl, more and more fees are being paid, and this incentivizes other players to start hodling. And this can have also a self-stabilizing effect on the price of the underlying asset, in this case, Erg. But this is just a conjecture at this point, right? So we are releasing this in the wild and we are curious to see what will happen. So the implementation on Ergo is already live. You can watch Pulsar's presentation about the implementation. And you can also try it in this address, hodlcoin.co.in. And you can also join us in Telegram at this address that you are seeing here. Thank you and have fun hodling your eggs.